Would you kindly watch this video? Would you kindly?
Can you feel life moving through your mind? Ooh, looks like it came back for more. Yeah! Feel time slipping down your spine. Ooh, you're trying to ignore. Yeah!
Easily one of my favorite parts about any video game is the boss battles. There's just something so great about testing your skills to the limits against a powerful foe. But easily the most important, and most often than not best boss in the game, is the final boss. A good final boss should play well, be climactic and satisfying, help wrap up the story, and leave a lasting impression on the player. Also, bonus points for any symbolism or great music. As usual for this list, I'm only including one boss battle per franchise, and though this should be obvious, the list will contain spoilers aplenty. With that all said, let's kick it! In the introduction to Kirby's Return to Dreamland, you meet a quirky little guy named Magolor. He's accidentally crashed his ship, and your goal for most of the game is to help him collect the missing parts. Once you do, you'll take him to his homeworld and you traitor! Yes, throughout the whole game, Magolor was using you just so he could obtain the Master Crown and gain godlike power. What follows is a three-phase battle that is equal parts vengeance and challenge. The first phase is like a standard 2D shooter, where Magolor sends his ship to shoot you down from the sky. Look, Ma, Kirby's shooting lasers! After you blow up his ship, Magolor stops and fights you one-on-one. Thanks to the power of the Master Crown, Magolor now has numerous deadly attacks and leaves little time for you to attack him. If you're not careful, this phase can kill you very easily. Finally, once you whittle down his health enough, Magolor will put up a magic shield that can only be broken by various super abilities. This leads to one of the most satisfying finishing blows in any game ever, as you finally get to cut down Magolor with your Ultra Sword. The third form is similar to the second, only the difficulty is ramped up to insane. What puts this battle on the list is the feeling of satisfaction and revenge you get from it, as well as the overall challenge. Seriously, even as a fairly well-seasoned Kirby player, it took me days to get past this battle for the first time. Unless you use the Spark ability.
I'm invincible!
I honestly prefer the fight with the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3 over the fight with Liquid Ocelot from Metal Gear Solid 4. Sorry Alex, not this time. Anyway, to explain why I love the final battle against the boss so much, I first have to go over the plot of Snake Eater, so beware of major spoilers. Snake Eater introduces a woman, known only as the boss, as a character who is meant to be trusted. She's the leader of the Cobra unit, mother to Snake and Ocelot, and a legendary soldier for America. Cut to a few minutes later, she double-crosses the country, gives Volgan access to 2 small nuclear bombs, and tries to kill Snake. Metal Gear Solid, ladies and gentlemen. A game that teaches you the importance of family. So yeah, this basically sets off the events of Snake Eater. Cut to the end of the game, and Snake finally confronts the boss within a field of lilies. Before the fight actually begins though, the boss gives a little backstory about her motive. Yes, it's technically monologuing, but at least it has a purpose to the storyline. Now, truth be told, the actual combat portion of the fight isn't really that great. It gets the job done, but it barely even feels like a boss fight. Basically, the boss hides herself in the lilies, while you have to hide behind trees to avoid her gunfire. Then, you wait for her to come to you in order to actually attack her. But it's all worth it for the cutscene that follows it. After the boss's death, the lilies turn blood red in agony, and Snake escapes with The next day, she's gone and left Snake a video recording. In the recording, explains that the boss was never aligned with the Soviet Union and had only committed her evil acts throughout the game so that America's involvement in the bombing would be erased. So yeah, it's that sort of emotional attachment that makes this boss battle so great. If the combat had been a little more ingenuitive, the final boss could have been much, much higher up. Now, the Crash Bandicoot games have never really been that serious. They're fun games and all, but they never really tapped into your emotion like most other game series. However, the final battle of Warped is an exception. You're fighting your arch-rival and an evil tiki doll inside an active time machine that is about to implode on itself. Just listen to that and tell me you aren't already hooked. On top of the awesome scenario, this fight plays out excellently. Throughout the fight, Dr. Cortex will fly around behind a force field that prevents you from damaging him and throw fireballs at you. Every once in a while, he stops to throw bombs, lowering his force field and allowing you to attack him. Then spin into him and knock him down the hole, rinse and repeat twice to win. Oh, and did I mention that 2 voodoo demigods are clashing in the foreground? Yeah, this battle is pretty epic and serves as a great climax to the rivalry between Crash and Cortex. There's one thing that really bothers me about this battle though. Why would Dr. Cortex be detonating bombs inside a machine that he already knows is incredibly unstable? Sure, he's trying to get rid of Crash, but if the machine collapses, which he knows it will, they'll both die. Oh well, at least this fight plays out great. When looking for a representative from the Mario franchise, there are certainly a lot to choose from. I was tempted to go with choices like Ultimate Koopa from Mario 64 and Bowser from Mario World, but ultimately, quality trumps nostalgia. The fight against Super Dementia from Super Paper Mario really has a lot going for it, and I feel like it should be talked about more often. First off, Dementia introduces himself earlier in the game as a servant of Count Bleck, and you have a relatively easy fight against him. But afterwards, he says, "That was just an hors d'oeuvre. The next time we meet, we will feast on a deadly 8-course meal." Gee, doesn't that remind you of another Mario RPG character? However, in terms of the message itself, he wasn't kidding around. At the end of the game, after you defeat Count Bleck, Dementia appears, claims that this was all part of his plot to recreate the world, discards Count Bleck, takes control of Luigi, absorbs the power of the Chaos Heart, and forms possibly the most disturbing design for a Mario boss in history. After that, the fight begins and, well, he's invincible. So it seems you have no hope against this boss. But luckily for you, Count Bleck manages to get the pure hearts working again, and you use them to help stomp Dementia down. The combat itself is pretty cool too. The idea is to jump onto these moving platforms and stomp onto Dementia's head. However, he's not defenseless. Dementia can fire at you and jump on you for his attacks. Both are relatively easy to avoid if you just keep jumping, but you have to be careful to stay on the platforms at the same time. Lastly, this fight has an incredible music track to go along with it, known as the Ultimate Show. My only real problem with this battle is that it doesn't make any use of the different perspectives. I mean, after all, that was one of the game's biggest gimmicks. I feel like they could have at least tried to incorporate it. Oh well, on a scale of 1 to green, how great is this final battle? That's what I thought. Now, there's a certain game out there that's gotten a lot of attention from us countdown makers. Okay, there's actually a lot of those, but one that's gotten a particularly high degree of attention is Shadow of the Colossus. Well, guess what? You get to hear about it some more now! Shadow of the Colossus has a way of making you feel like a puppet. As you're playing, you get the feeling that you shouldn't be doing these things and killing these colossi, but at the same time, you don't know what else you can do. The final battle against Malice is a wonderful amplification of this feeling. As you slowly make your way towards the final Colossus, the clouds roll in, the sky goes dark, and your horse falls off a cliff. Finally, after you meet the towering creature, it starts shooting lightning at you in self-defense. Slowly, you begin to make your way towards the Colossus and start to climb it. As the fight goes on, a despair-filled farewell plays in the background, and your emotions keep building each time you stab the creature. Finally, when you lay the final smackdown on Malice, you don't feel satisfied. You don't feel relief. You don't even feel happy. All you feel is emptiness at the deed that has been done. This is a much more realistic depiction of killing than most other modern games offer, and it really does get to you. However, like the boss, the combat itself isn't really that great, but the emotions you feel throughout this battle really make up for that fact. Malice, this is for my horse. Warning: disturbing content. Mad World is a game that is very consistent in both a stylish atmosphere and quirk, as well as an incredibly satisfying combat system. Thankfully, the final battle against the Black Baron amplifies all of these to the max. The Black Baron appears several times throughout the course of the game. He introduces the bloodbath challenges in each level and manages to survive being brutally beaten each time as a living demonstration. So yeah, we love to see this guy, and it was a pretty big shock to see him as the final boss. As for the fight itself, it plays out excellently. The Black Baron uses several powerful physical attacks that can easily pummel Jack, has an insane amount of health and resiliency, and his power struggle is just downright awe-inspiring. I also have to give mention to the music in this phase of the fight. Look Pimpin'. Not only is it an incredibly catchy tune, but it serves to tell the Baron's story as the fight goes on. Then, after taking enough punishment, the Baron goes into his second form, a souped-up supernatural version of his former self. He now has an entirely new moveset to pummel you with. Seriously, how the hell can someone even kick that fast? The music even changes in this phase to show that the Baron is through messing around. My biggest praise of this fight though is how it feels like a battle of equals. In other fights, you went up against big, hulking beasts, supernatural beings or trained killers, but the Black Baron really just feels like an equal to Jack, but still manages to be one of the toughest fights in the game. Overall, this battle has everything the final boss needs, but the others on this list just have a bit more to offer. Bullseye! Now, there's something you should all know about me. I'm a pretty big enthusiast in mythology. So, much like my friend Josh, I love seeing these different interpretations of mythology in media and especially video games. As such, very much unlike Josh, I just adore Okami. And yes, Yami is number 4 on my list. Yes, tons of other countdown makers have poured out over this fight and the game in general, but at least it's for a good reason. The battle with Yami is just beautifully crafted. As the fight begins, Yami steals all of your brush techniques away from you, not exactly sure how that works, leaving you defenseless and unarmed. After this, you proceed to literally beat the techniques back out of him, gradually regaining your abilities and chipping away at Yami. During this portion of the fight, Yami takes on several different forms, including a slot machine, a walking mecha, and even a freaking tank. Then, after you've whittled down his health enough, it appears the fight is over. But then... What follows is a very touching scene where all the inhabitants of the world give their blessings to Amaterasu and give her the strength to keep fighting, as well as a new power, Sunrise. With this new power, you expose Yami's one true weakness and deliver the final smackdown. While this boss is incredibly long, it manages to never become boring, which is something I greatly admire. Rich in symbolism, amazingly accompanied, playing brilliantly, and satisfying as hell, this is one final boss that you will not easily forget. One last thing though. Why is the Lord of Ultimate Darkness a fish? I mean seriously, when was the last time you were intimidated by a Right. One of the biggest problems a lot of final bosses face today is that they try too hard to be shocking. I mean, don't get me wrong, giving the player a surprise is a good thing if it's done at the right time, but for the final conflict, You really need some time to get your senses and thoughts in order for the battle to take its full effect. However, there is one exception to this rule. A boss that in a sense comes out of nowhere, but is also very well built up throughout the game.
You like revenge, right? Everybody likes revenge. Well, let's go get some.
Wheatley from Portal 2. Talk about a breath of fresh air. This is how the surprise final boss is done right. Now, Wheatley himself is an interesting character. In the first act of Portal 2, Wheatley is introduced as your companion. He teaches you the basic moves and even helps you out through a few puzzles. But then, he reveals that he's been deceiving you the entire time, takes over the facility, and traps Gladys' personality in a potato.
Potato! Potato!
So now that we've established who the bad guy is, you and Gladys put aside your differences and work together to take down Wheatley and get Gladys back in control. Now you may be thinking, how is this a surprise final boss if you know who he is for the entire game? Well, that's a legitimate question because the fact that the boss fight happens isn't surprising at all. The surprise is that once you finally reach Wheatley at the end, he's totally lost control over the facility, and the entire thing's about to come crumbling down. Anyway, this fight plays out excellently. Wheatley starts the fight by activating the neurotoxin, a poisonous gas that will kill Chell in a matter of minutes. Also, for a game where you cannot directly attack an opponent, the combat is actually very well executed. Throughout the fight, Wheatley will occasionally throw bombs at you. The idea is to use the portals so that the bombs actually hit Wheatley instead of you. Then, Gladys will send you a personality core for you to attach to him. Do this 3 times and he will be corrupted enough for Gladys to take back control. Also, probably more so than any other fight thus far on the list, this fight has an amazing atmosphere. As the fight goes on, fires start erupting, parts of the arena begin to crumble, and Wheatley's dialogue really add to the sense that this building is coming down. Also, the music. Known as Bombs for Throwing at You, this track captures the chaos of the fight, the sadistic personality of Wheatley, and the despair of the collapsing building surprisingly well with a very catchy techno beat. Overall, this is how the surprise final boss should be done. Take notes, Final Fantasy. For those of you who've been wondering, this is what would have been number 1 on my top 150 Zelda bosses. You know, I'm very surprised that this bottle isn't talked about more often. I mean, sure, Majora itself gets quite a bit of attention, but why not this battle? It's so complete! Majora's Mask is a possessor of dark magic used by an ancient tribe to hex its enemies and criminals. However, the mask was sealed away because its magic was too strong and uncontrollable. Hundreds of years later, the happy mask salesman finds it, but Skull Kid quickly robs him of it. Skull Kid is then corrupted by the power of the mask, sent to the moon to destroy the land of Termina, and makes life for the inhabitants a living hell. So yeah, Majora's Mask is something that you really want to get vengeance on, but also something that shouldn't be underestimated. Or, in layman's terms, it's the bad guy, kill it with fire! At the end of the game, you do just that. Well, not with fire, but you get the idea. The fight against Majora has 3 forms. In the first form, Majora's Mask will fly around, fire lasers, and hurl itself at you, and even take control of the boss remains to attack you. There are many ways you can attack him in this phase, but the simplest way is to shoot it down with your elbow blades as a Zora, then strike it down with your sword. In the second form, Majora grows arms and legs and begins running around the room and dancing sporadically. Now, as far as I can tell, its only attack in this form is to run into you, but good luck chasing it down even with the Zora mask. In the third form, Majora's limbs beef up and grow very long. Majora then attacks you by swinging around its arms like tentacles and occasionally like whips. Again, the best way is to stun it as a Zora, then wail on it as regular Link. Now, some people would argue that the Fierce Deity mask makes this fight too easy. Well, if you think about it, why shouldn't it make the battle easier? I mean, if you went to all the trouble of collecting the masks throughout the game only for it not to help you out, in the long run, then what was the point of trying to get the Fierce Deity mask in the first place? You see, it's a system of service and reward. You do the service of exploring the world and completing all the little side quests the game has to offer. Then you get the reward of a mask that pwns everything. However, the real highlight of this fight is not the combat, but the symbolism and music. Now, the music on its own isn't that great, but the way it's used in the fight serves to tell an interesting story. Majora as a whole is symbolic of chaos, and each form of this battle represents another aspect of chaos. The first form represents that chaos always starts small. The music here is very somber, as if there is no hope against fending off this monster. The second form represents the chaos is founded in insanity. The music here also complicates the downright loopy nature of Majora. The final form represents that chaos corrupts with power. However, unlike the previous forms, this form's music isn't representative of the form of Majora itself. In fact, it's rather upbeat and triumphant, as if to say, "Alright, I can do this. I've come this far, and I'm winning this fight." It's little details like that that make this fight so tremendous. It makes you wonder what could possibly top it. The battle against Malla is hands down the greatest final boss I have ever faced. Now, before I go over the fight itself, I have to start with the build-up, since that really is half of what makes this battle so great. Malla has been mentioned throughout the Legend of Spyro trilogy from the very start. Seriously, within the first minute of A New Beginning, Ignitus tells us about the Dark Master. Seriously, the almighty Dragon Guardians and even the Chronicler, a dragon of timeless age and wisdom, are afraid to speak his name. Also, Malla dark influence is absolutely everywhere. He commands a huge army of ape minions to do his bidding, corrupts and controls Cinder's actions, entire environments are dying from his influence, and even Spyro himself succumbs to his dark power on more than one occasion. Oh, and if you don't think that's impressive enough, he's not even alive at this point in the story. He was so strong and powerful before the events of the trilogy that he manages to do all of this even in death. But just who is this guy, and why is he so evil? Well, in the Eternal Night, we get some backstory on the guy. We find out that, at one time, Malla was the first purple dragon. He studied under the Dragon Masters and quickly became very powerful. People thought that he could become the most powerful dragon there had ever been. And they were right. Malla became so strong that the rest of the dragons were actually beginning to suffer because of it, and he was asked by the elders to stop his training. But he couldn't accept that. He turned against his kind, grew his power and armies, and turned the world to chaos. The other dragons somehow managed to stop him, and he was trapped in the Well of Souls. But then, between the events of the Eternal Night and Dawn of the Dragon, the apes helped him to escape, and he made sure the world knew he was back. In Dawn of the Dragon, Malla been out and fighting for 3 years, and he's almost completely taken over the entire world, amassed his armies, and created a huge wall of dark energy that protects his base. Oh, and the entire world's about to fall apart. Finally, Spyro and Cinder make it through the Wall of Fire and confront Malla. Jeez, and that was just the build-up. We still have the actual fight to go over. Now, this fight has 3 forms. In the first form, you're fighting Malla in an aerial dogfight inside the very heart of the Earth. Malla has several deadly attacks he can use, including swiping at you with his claws, ramming you with his head, barreling his whole body toward you, breathing a barrage of fireballs, and shooting a nearly unavoidable stream of purple fire at you. This form is very tough, and if you don't have a lot of experience with your different breaths or switching between Spyro and Cinder, you pretty much have no chance. Before the second form of the battle starts, the process of the world's end is completed, and it literally starts to crumble beneath your feet. This second form is fought on the ground, on a platform that is falling to the center of the Earth. Malifor keeps all of his attacks from the previous form, but also adds a homing ice shot, homing purple shots, and a force field similar to Taboo's off-wave attack. He also moves much more often around the arena than in the first form. Along with new attacks, the difficulty in this form is even greater than that of the first form. Finally, in the third form, the very platform you are standing on starts to break apart beneath your feet, Malifor gains a protective shield as well as sped up attacks, and the difficulty is further spiked. But really, do you even need me to tell you how incredible this battle is? Just look at it! This battle simply looks amazing to watch. Finally, the music in this battle. Each form of the battle has a different music track to go along with it, and all of them are awesome. The first form's track is very imposing, and makes especially good use of the ominous choir. The second track is very dark. It really makes you feel like the end of the world is approaching, but also inspires you to keep fighting. Finally, the third track does exactly what it should do in this situation. Get your hopes up, get your adrenaline pumping, and your mind blown from the pure epicness of the score. Really, this battle has absolutely everything I could ever ask for in a boss battle. Amazing build-up, terrific combat, spectacular presentation, and the grand conclusion to one of my favorite trilogies of all time. If that doesn't deserve the #1 spot, then what the hell does?